Welcome, everyone, to the Profitable Steward Podcast. My name is Jared Sorensen. I am calling in today from northeastern Nevada, where we have our ranch, and I'm privileged to be joined here with William DeMille. William, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's exciting to be here.
No, I reached out to William and invited him to jump on this podcast. We're going to do something a little bit different, and we're going to talk about history and current events. And specifically, what do we need to do? While doing that, we're going to avoid the doom and gloom, and we are also going to provide a lot of hope in our discussion. As we begin, I want to give a shout out to one of our colleagues and a friend of ours who is north of the border in Canada, Amy Hay. She has a company who helps direct to consumer, mostly beef sales, but if you've got anything that you're trying to sell direct to consumer, get a hold of Amy Hay. You'll find the link for that in the show notes. Her company's called Sell Beef Direct. And the work that she does ties in a lot with what we're doing here in our podcast, moving away from being a price taker to a price maker. So, William, let's introduce yourself first of all. Tell these guys, if this is the first time you're meeting William DeMille, tell them who you are.
All right. Thank you, Jared. So I have been a farmer, modern homesteader, rancher, gardener all my life. Grew up in Hurricane, Utah. I've lived in Missouri, working in the corn and soybean fields. I've lived in California. I've lived in several different places in Utah, Colorado, and everywhere I've been, I've worked in agriculture, and it's been a good experience. I've worked in great big commercial hog farms. My real fun thing that I love is gardening. That's kind of my baby. I love greenhouses. I love growing things year round. I really enjoy sheep, everything animals. I'm very much into livestock. I love the whole idea of building businesses, and I run a school right now. I call it the Georgic Schoolroom. Georgic is the ancient term for farming. And in that class, it's a summer class, it's 4 months long. And I bring adults to the ranch and we teach them personal development by having them work in agriculture. And so it's a lot of fun. And then the students here, they see a problem in the world, they identify something they don't like, and then we use their personal gifts and talents to figure out how to serve the world, serve the thing that they don't like. So that's kind of me and what I'm doing with my life right now.
Very, very good. Well, thank you, William. Yep, it's great. We're grateful to have you on this podcast and that folks can get to know you a little bit more. You do have openings right now currently for your class this summer, correct?
Yeah, we're taking applications right now. So if anybody wants to come and do the Georgic Schoolroom, that would be awesome. Just go to my website, georgicrevolution.com.
Okay. Yeah, definitely check that out. I've got actually a son and a daughter-in-law who graduated from the program last year, and
Yeah.
it's a big part of what we do here on the ranch. All right, William. There's a lot of buzz now around regenerative agriculture. There's what is it, $700 million that's out up for grabs right now that was just
Yep.
earmarked for regenerative agriculture.
Yep. That's right.
And did you see McDonald's is pledging $200 million to regenerative agriculture? Is that an oxymoron or what?
It's kind of like a few years ago, early 2000s, when Walmart said, if they want organic food, then we will supply it. That's been 20 years, and the food at Walmart still isn't any better.
Ah, so I'm sure Ray Kroc, and he was a great man, created a great business. I would not associate regeneration healthy food with McDonald's. That just does not seem to jive. But I think they're going to have a bit of a challenge rebranding McDonald's as health food. Nonetheless, we see that there's money being channeled into that. And as you say, maybe it is just a marketing ploy. They're going to follow where the money goes. Right now, the word regeneration, it is something that people are becoming aware of. But let's back up before we jump into what we're currently looking at, and let's rewind. Let's talk about the cycles in history. One of the books that you and I both studied is called The Fourth Turning. It's by the author Strauss and Howe. I believe one of them died. They have a couple other books around cycles of history, but The Fourth Turning's been a classic. And I think it was your brother who first introduced me to that book years ago. And I've read it multiple times and studied it in groups. So can you summarize what the fourth turning means and why that's important to have that understanding?
Yeah, for sure. So the fourth turning it's a pretty good book. There's a lot of other books that talk about the cycles of human history. The Bible is one. There's many books out there that talk about all these different cycles. And so it's not just that we're looking at one book. What we're looking at is the cycles so that we can see where we are today. And that's the real practical application. So in the fourth turning, Strauss and Howe, they point out that they're in 100 year, we call 100 years a century, but when you're looking at history, we call it a cyculum. So in that time frame, as that cyculum happens, it can happen from anywhere around 80 years to 120 years. That's usually how it works out when you look at, the 3,000 years of written history that we have. So there is the first turning when we're building a society. The second turning, things kind of normalize, and it's kind of the way things are, and people raising their families can make pretty good predictions on what we should do to be successful. The third turning, people start questioning those institutions and the way that the world is. And then in the fourth turning, there's a lot of conflict and it kind of falls apart. So in the book, The Fourth Turning, when they wrote it, I think we were probably in the current third turning at that time when it was published. And they were saying the fourth turning is going to happen. They came out recently and published a new book called The Fourth Turning is Here, saying that, okay, we have officially reached that fourth turning. So now we're at a point where if we do the things that our parents and grandparents have told us to do, it doesn't work very good. And that's the thing that happens in this whole fourth turning. And we see this in the cycles of history. So people who were growing up, like most of our parents and grandparents, if we're an adult, if we took their advice, life worked pretty good. But for people who are in their 20s now, and teens, if they're doing what their parents and grandparents said, meaning if you go to college, get a college degree, and you try to get a job and stay in that career your whole life, it's not going to happen. In the last 20 years, we really see that. A lot of people are changing careers every few years, and people are getting lots of different jobs. And there's a lot of old people around in their 70s, 80s, scratching their heads saying, why can't these young people just stick with one company? Because it worked for them. And it always works for people in, second and third turnings, that kind of works. But in the fourth turnings, we have to reinvent the world. So just a little bit of context. Right now, we are waiting for a crisis to kind of change the world. There's probably going to be some kind of a big event. There's all the people that call themselves preppers. They're getting ready for the end of the world or whatever. Well, the last fourth turning would have been the World War II era. And the one before that would have been the Civil War era. The one before that would have been the Revolutionary War era. So those are the times of the fourth turnings. Those are the big crises when we saw major societal shifts happen in world, or at least those are the events in our country. And each country kind of has their own cycles. But now it's interesting because it's kind of becoming a world cycle now, because with the modern inventions of travel, and, because you can be anywhere in the world in 24 hours, buy some plane tickets, and you can be anywhere. So these cycles are not so much specific to countries now. They're more coming around that it's becoming a one world thing. So when the crack happens, there's going to be a crack pretty much worldwide. It's not going to affect everybody, but it will affect pretty much the industrialized world, I think. That's my thought on that part of it. And we've never really seen that before, because in World War II, there were a lot of countries involved in that. But you go back to the Civil War, and it was only the United States. And the Revolutionary War, pretty much only the United States. The other countries were on different cycles in those times. But the reason that this is important for us now is to understand and to see the opportunities that give us hope. I was talking to some young people this morning for about 3 hours. They were here at my house, and I was telling them how excited I am for the world we live in right now. And they were sitting here kind of wide-eyed thinking, wait a minute, the robots and AI are taking all our jobs. We have no idea what to go into if we go to college, because we don't know what the world's going to look like in 5 or 10 years. And this is true. They are right. But from where I'm sitting, I'm seeing the whole thing unfold. Well, that's how all fourth turnings are. Nobody knows what the future will be in a few years. When Europe and the rest of the world was at war before America entered World War II, the young people were saying the same thing. They were sitting around saying, "Well, we don't even know if there will be a world in a few years," and we're still here. And my optimistic point of view is that we will still be here in 20 years from now, and those who thrive are going to do a certain set of things that always help societies thrive. And so you kind of have to go back and look at the biology of whatever animal we're talking about to help it thrive. So we are humans, we are people. What do we need to thrive? People need food, they need water, they need shelter, they need clothing. And what do the people want right now? So I did some research for this podcast today on what ranchers have to offer. And I didn't need to do much research on that. We have mostly meat, beef, lamb, pork, whatever. And so the real research went into what are the people who eat food, what are they looking for? And what are the current affairs happening right now that are an opportunity that give hope to ranchers? And so I just have some fun things to share with you. And I am coming from this historical point of view when I talk about this.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's important to realize that while history may not exactly repeat itself, it does rhyme. There are patterns. Some people say we're long overdue for this reset period, for this crisis to come. Regardless, we know that just as one season follows the other, what follows the crisis will be a rebuilding. And so we know that, as you pointed out, the skills that got us through those previous cycles are not necessarily the skills that are going to help us to succeed in the current or the upcoming one. And so before we jump into the current side of that, I think it ties into what we're talking about currently. Entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs, they're the ones who will thrive in the fourth and subsequently in the first turning. Am I right?
That yes, for sure. And that's the way it's always been. People who are creating something new and they are fulfilling a legitimate need for their neighbors and their communities. That's who always rebuilds after crises.
Yeah. What would you label the people who don't thrive, who flounder or who struggle through the fourth and the first turning?
Employees,
That's kind of harsh.
business owners thrive. Employees don't know what to do because they don't have a job.
Yeah.
Because there's nobody employing them because they can't be employed. And there's a million reasons why. There's actually probably 30 reasons why. Million was a big number. But there's a lot of reasons why employees struggle. But see, in the 50s and 60s, we were taught to be employees. Be an employee. Go do it, man. It's going to be great. Go get a job doing this thing. And it worked. It
Yeah.
worked. I mean, many of our grandparents and parents, depending on how old we are, they had one job their life, and that was their career. My dad was a fourth grade school teacher, and he did well. My mom was a college teacher. She didn't do it very long because she had kids and she was raising us. But that model worked. And my dad told all of us, I have two brothers, he told all three of us, he said, go to college, get your degree in whatever you want. It'd be great. You could go into something and it'd be neat. You can get in with a company, be a great employee, be loyal. They will take good care of you. And I've had like 20 jobs over the years because that is the world that I have lived in the last 20 years. It's been more of a volatile job market.
Yeah. Well, and we did a little research. So just to back up just a little bit, this is our second or third take on this podcast. Whenever you do something good, the adversary is going to be right there to block it. So we just take this as an indicator that, hey, we are doing something really good. And so there's going to be opposition.
That's right. There always is.
So if you embark on something and you're like, man, this is really hard and it didn't work out and it took me 3 tries, it's all right. It's all right. It probably means you're doing something good. So in the research that we did leading up to the original podcast, looked at the question, is there a financial incentive to getting a college degree? And I think the answer is it depends, right? If you're going to be a professional, an engineer, a lawyer, a doctor, something where you need that specialized training, absolutely. There still is a path to be able to get there. And the compensation more than outweighs the cost in most of those career paths. And a lot of the other ones, it's not. There's not a financial incentive for you to take on, especially if you're incurring debt and you're spending that time. As the saying goes, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Like you're going to spend way more time and effort than you're going to get out of it. So bottom line, William, what do you advise your students to do right now? These young people, these young adults that are coming through that are at that pivot point?
Yeah, everybody that comes to my school, we have an exercise, and we actually did this in a podcast with you, Jared, last year. But we just take a piece of paper and we make 5 columns on it, and then we just discover who that person is. What are your interests, your gifts, your talents, your passions? What are the things that drive you to wake up in the morning and to live your life? And then from those things, so we spend a day or two on that list, and then from that, how can you use that to serve a need in the world? What's happening in our world today? Usually it's something that you don't like as an individual that you're able to serve. And what can you do? And that is one of the best ways. See, we shouldn't be starting businesses to make money. We should be starting businesses to serve people. That's why we start a
Yeah.
business. And maybe it's not why everybody starts a business, but it's what we should be doing. So, in context of talking to ranchers and farmers and people in agriculture, what is your product and who needs that product? That's what I'm always thinking about, because the ranchers are so often the solution to the eater's problem. And the eaters are the solution to the rancher's problem. But the government is kind of in the mix, and there's all the labels. We've got organic labels. We have like cage free and pasture fed and grass fed. There's all these labels. And for many of these labels, you have to meet a certain government standard to legally say that I am organic. Well, you have to be certified. You can't just say it anymore. In the 1980s and 90s, when I was a very young farmer, I was proud to say I was an organic farmer. But in the 1990s, or I mean in the 2000s, that became illegal for me to say that unless I jumped through a whole bunch of government red tape. So I just quit. I mean, I didn't stop farming, but I stopped saying what I was. And now when we say regenerative, that means that we are an organic farmer. That's funny because there's a lot of people who are regenerative farmers now and call themselves that, but they didn't like the hippie movement of organic back in the day. So it's kind of
Yeah.
funny how that has evolved and changed over time. But there's just such a beautiful and optimistic opportunity right now for ranchers to be able to get their food into the market. So because there's people who want it. I have some numbers here if I can just share those with you. So the CAGR, that means compound annual growth rate of an industry or a business. So when you're looking at the regenerative grass-fed segment of the consumer, direct-to-consumer meat world, the CAGR is 11% per year. Now, most agriculture is 0 to 2% per year. So that's how much it grows every year. Sometimes agriculture is a negative number and it's growing less. So that's not a good thing. But 0 to 2% is the normal, but the grass-fed segment is 11%. So that it's not just 11% per year, but it's a compounding number as you go on. So in 5 years, the market has grown 50% bigger than when it started. So that is a really big deal for people in the grass-fed market. So I did a whole bunch of research on who are the customers looking for a really natural product. Just they want cattle that are grown on a ranch. They don't want cattle from a feedlot. They don't want to be buying their beef from a restaurant or a grocery store. They want to get it direct from a rancher. And I thought, well, is there even a market for this? So I did a bunch of research, and it's interesting because there's a huge market for this. There are a lot of young people in their 20s, and that is the only way they want to buy their meat. And they like meat. The paleo diet's a big thing right now. People are seeing the benefits of eating grass-fed beef. There's a lot of the studies out there that are showing that grass-fed beef is one of the most nutritious foods there is. If all you ate was beef for 6 months or a year, you will still be alive. You won't have huge deficiencies. For most people who are healthy, and this isn't a health podcast, so do your research before you stop eating other things. But these are the kinds of studies that are coming out that are getting these customers to want to have a relationship directly with a rancher. So they are looking and they can't find enough ranchers who will sell them meat. And so it's an interesting thing. And I'm sure there's a lot of ranchers saying, well, I haven't found enough customers. And it's always a hard thing to match the people up. But if you start working at it, you can get that done. So anyway, it's just the numbers are there and the numbers seem to be a real like a legitimate demand.
For
Demand
sure.
for the grass-fed beef is growing much faster than the supply. And it's not that there aren't enough beef animals, it's that ranchers have not made themselves available so the consumer doesn't know where to find the beef. They what do? Drive out in the country and knock on somebody's door? And some of the people are doing that, but that's not how the young people shop nowadays. People shop online. They are getting online and they are searching for grass-fed beef. That's how they search. So when you're in the world of building relationships, it's a really important thing to think about because all healing and all success and all accomplishment happens in relationships. We don't really accomplish stuff that's important in our life alone. It happens in relationships. So as somebody who owns a calf to sell or 50 or 300 calves to sell, you want to build that relationship with the consumer who's looking for this stuff. And I see a huge opportunity here. It's a big positive.
Yeah. Just to pause there for a second, there certainly is a huge demand, and approximately 80% of the grass fed that is sold and labeled, oftentimes USDA, is imported from other countries. Grass fed, and that's not necessarily grass fed organic, but it would be a grass fed or a pasture raised label. So certainly there's a need for producers to continue to produce whatever it is they're producing, whether it's grass fed, grain fed, pasture, poultry. And it's a little outside the context of this discussion today, but that's where Amy really steps in, is to help you learn those skills that we don't have, right? You talked about how the rancher is the solution to the eater's problem. A lot of times we don't want to be the solution. We just want to be left alone.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
hopefully through listening to this podcast and tapping into the amazing amount of resources that are out there, if you feel that calling, like, hey, I can sell direct to consumer, there are a lot of channels, a lot of opportunities now that weren't available even 10 years ago. We don't have to be the pioneer anymore. We don't have to die with arrows in our back with our face in the dirt, because somebody's already done it. They've done it successfully and they have a proven path that we can follow. So we know that there's a legitimate need. We know this industry is growing. What do we need to do as producers to be able to prepare ourselves and our businesses so that we can tap into a portion of this market?
yeah. That's a good question, and that is the question that we need to be answering. I like how you said it. What do we need to do to prepare? I have a list of 5 things here, and I'll just go through them real quick that I
Yeah.
think answers that pretty good. The first thing is just understand that these 5 things are a process. You don't want to do them all tomorrow or today. It's a process. Over the next year or two, as you start implementing these things, it becomes effective. If you go cold turkey, there could be some problems. So let's go to the first one. Number one of how to prepare ourselves is get out of the label game. Get out of the idea of thinking, oh, if I'm going to actually make a profit with my ranch, then I need to do all of these things. There's the regenerative, there's sustainable, there's organic, all those things I already mentioned. Get out of that game. Don't worry about the labels, because your customer, the new customer that's coming online to get this food, they don't care about the label. They see the labels as a diluted, politicized capture by bureaucracy, and they don't like it. So you know how I was showing the numbers earlier, where in 5 years there's going to be 50% more people wanting this food than there is now, the grass-fed beef. They don't trust the labels anyway. And it's interesting because we've been taught for quite a while, a good decade, that the labels are a good thing and a good marketing thing. Now, if you have a bunch of customers who want the label, go ahead and label it. You could jump the hoops, and maybe that's a niche market that works for you. But in the research I'm doing, a lot of the new customers, they don't really care about the label and they think that you're hiding something by getting a label. And the label was supposed to do the opposite and show the consumer that this is a legit product and here's why it's legitimate. Well, the younger generation, people in their 20s now, they don't really want that. And that's interesting. That's a group of people who I don't really know any ranchers raising, let's be clear, anybody in agriculture, whether it's fruits, vegetables, any meat, eggs. I don't know anybody who actually has a bunch of customers like this. It's a newer trend, but there are millions of these people right now. A lot of people like the organic label because they kind of are used to it now. People are like the idea of a sustainable or a regenerative label. They're starting to get used to it. But there's all these young people are like, "Do you have a label?" And then they're suspicious if you do. So it's a
Okay.
crazy world. The reason
Yeah.
I'm talking about that is because it opens up a whole new opportunity where you don't have to do any of that. If you
Yeah.
make yourself available and you raise your hand and say, "Hey, I'm not doing any of that. I'm just gonna sell my beef directly to you." They're gonna be like, "Oh, okay, good." And then they're gonna ask you, "Well, how are you raising it?" And then you need to be able to tell them exactly what you're doing, and then they're excited about it. And I'm like, okay, yeah, this is good. But it saves the rancher paperwork. Saves you inspectors coming to your ranch, um, and any kind of grants that are out there to help with this, like the 700 million from RFK. It's that money's already going to people who already have relationships. So people who are trying to do something new, it's going to be hard to get any of that money anyway. So forget the grants. Just go find the people who want to buy your beef. So
Yeah.
that's point number one. Start
Okay.
changing our mindset of let's get out of the label game. Now that label game can work for some people. If you're already in it and it's working, I'm not telling you to change. But if you're a cow-calf operator who's been selling at the auction and you are thinking in the next 5 years that things are still going to be volatile, which they are, then this is a way to start thinking differently.
Yeah.
Which leads us to point number two, which is what you're selling is a relationship, not a certificate or certification. Okay. So sell yourself to real people, sell direct to an eater. You're building trust over time. So, it takes 4, 5, 6, 7 years to become a community member that everybody knows. Oh, they have really great beef. And that's where we get our beef. We get our quarter of a beef there every year. Somebody else says, oh, yeah, we get a beef and a half, depending on the size of the families they're feeding. But you become a trusted person in the community. And that's kind of the name of the game. You're selling the relationship because people know what they're getting and they really like that.
Okay. This is really good. So first, number one, get past the labels. Number two, what you're really selling is a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not
And
it's
yeah.
not so much the product. We in our challenge that we did last week, our online challenge, we invited the participants to answer the question, are you selling a product or are you selling a commodity? Maybe what I
Mhm.
should be is a third option. Are we selling a relationship?
Yeah, yeah. Let me even simplify this a little bit because we say sell a relationship, and guess what? We're still selling something, and that stops like half the ranchers I know, and I know quite a few. That's going to stop them dead in their boots because they're not going to sell anything. They raise cattle. They're not salesmen. And so let me simplify the wording for you. Become friends with more people because when you become a new friend with somebody, and you're a legitimate friend, you just sold them your relationship. That's all it means. Become friends with people, and the people want your beef because you have a great product.
Yeah.
And so that's all it means. It's that simple. And that's still going to stop a few people in the track because they don't want to build more relationships. But
Well,
there's an opportunity for people who will, and that's the point.
speaking of relationships, this would be a good point to interject your story about your students last year, the one who grew up as a rancher and the one who came from the city.
Yeah. Okay. So we had 12 students here last year on the ranch. But by the way, Jared lives on one side of the ranch. I'm on the other side of the mountain. And so I kind of manage this side while he's over there managing that side. So we live on the same ranch. And so they were here. The students were here on this side. And as part of the Georgic school room, we butcher a beef because I'm very much about being real, being authentic. If you're going to eat meat, you ought to at least see the process. And a lot of people want to learn the homesteading skills, and that's a big reason a lot of people come. One student came from California, and a great kid, 18 years old, didn't quite know where he wanted to go in life, was trying to explore things. Me and my wife are friends with his parents, and he knew that we butchered animals here, and he was worried about it. So that it was a good experience when we butchered the animals. But he was pretty vocal about it, and they were kind of clashing, and they both talked to me about it privately. And I said, it's okay for people to have their own experience. It's fine, especially in this class. This is what this class is for. I'm not going to try to prove one way or the other. And so one thing I've noticed in agricultural people is there's kind of a flaw, and we need to get over it because we don't want our ranch to get messed up. If we invite a bunch of our people to our ranch for marketing, then we just lost the purity, the sacredness, the sanctity of the ranch. It's kind of how ranchers feel about it. They're very attached to their land quite often, and they don't want a bunch of city people there messing it up.
You even said that one of the required reading books is Green Grass in the Spring by the late Tony Malmberg. And
Yeah.
this rancher student of yours said he agreed with everything till he got to that point. And he said, what was he thinking bringing these guys out who knew nothing about the ranch?
Yeah.
And he said, I could never do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was his perspective. Halfway through the course, we were doing challenges where I challenged the students to do something that was really a challenge. This is not an easy class because we do things that push people to their very limits because we want people to graduate with the ability to do something good in this world. And so we challenge them in a very safe place because they're not going to get hurt here. And so halfway through the course, the ranching student comes in who had been rubbed so wrong by this other student from the city, and he had big dreams and really good ones for his life. And so he came in for his challenge, and I talked to him and we came up with a challenge. I said, I challenge you to become best friends with this person from the city person from California who has a different point of view. If you can do that, then you can accomplish anything in your life. He didn't like it, and he sat there but he wanted to. He wanted the challenge, and he knew, he could tell, it was obvious that, yeah, if I could do that, I could do anything because I can't do that. That was kind of his attitude. It wasn't a bad attitude. It was a real attitude. And he was thinking, I just don't know. So, but he left. And later on, near the end of the course, when it was time to go home, the student from the city came in and I was just having a one-on-one with him. And I said, so tell me about your time here. What have you enjoyed? What has been challenging? Have you made friends? And so we're just talking about this stuff. And he answered the part about friends. And he says, I did make a really good friend here this year. And I said, okay, who was it? He said the guy's name, which I'm not going to say today, but he mentioned the ranch boy. He's in his 20s. I shouldn't call him a boy, but the one that had clashed so much. And that was his challenge. The ranch kid's challenge was you become best friends with him. And if you can do that, then, and in that meeting, that initial meeting, he said, I don't even know how. I don't even know where to start. We have nothing in common. I said, oh, yes, you do. You're a person who has spent your life learning to love other people. You're a person who spent 2 years of your life doing a mission for your church so that you could bless other people. You're a person who actually loves other people. You're a person who studies the New Testament and the teachings of the Lord to know how to be better. And it was resonating with him when we had this talk. And he's like, yeah, okay, you're right. And so he went out and I didn't know. I didn't keep tabs on him, but weeks, months went by. And then to have the other student come in and tell me at the end that this ranch boy had become his best friend, that was amazing to me.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't believe in my students, but I have never seen a challenge so hard because it would be like taking somebody it was like two completely different political views, two totally different religious views. Not that they had those opposites specifically. Just that they were so different. Their worldviews were so incredibly different. The way they thought about everything was just vastly night and day. And he asked me in that initial one, he says, I don't know how to do it. So I talked to him about those things. I said, well, you're going to have to change because you are already the person who can do this, but you're going to have to live the thing that you've been believing and preaching. You're going to have to be a friend, and being a friend is to listen. Don't tell him a thing. Don't say one thing to him. Don't share one opinion with him for at least a month, or maybe it was a week. I'm not sure what I said at this point, but something like that. Just listen to him. Ask inspired questions. Get to know him. Let him talk to you. And I'm not sure exactly what process he went through, but it was pretty awesome because they're friends at this point.
Yeah.
And it was pretty neat. So why
That's a
do I
great
tell
story.
this story? I tell this story here because we're building relationships. This whole point number 2 is all about selling a relationship. We don't sell a relationship by saying, well, I'm a rancher and we're 5 generations into this, and I'll be darned if I'm going to lose the ranch on my watch. That's noble for you to maybe teach your kids, but your customers don't care. Your customers need healthy food. So ask your customers what they want. Listen to your customers. And if they say, we want cattle that have not had vaccinations, then don't give all the vaccinations. If you have customers that say, we want cattle that don't have corn and soybeans going through the digestive tract, then do a grass-fed operation. You got to listen to your customer and give them what they want. That's how we build a relationship.
Perfect. All right. So what's point 3?
Point number 3, you do need to be measuring things that matters to your customers. Okay? So in opposition to measuring what a government label needs, measure the things that your customer wants. Customers want to know that the animals are healthy and you have a good animal health program. And that's a tricky word because when we say animal health program, it means all the vaccines that your vet gives them. But I'm talking about something else. But they want to know that they have a good life. They want to know that you're using reduced inputs so that it's more ecologically friendly. And it's going to be better for you because you're going to make more money. They want to know that your soil has more water infiltration than other places, so you're capturing more rainwater. These are the things that this new group of people wanting stuff, that's what they want. And those are easy things for ranchers to measure. We'll say, okay, our soil organic matter is really good, and here's where it was 8 years ago, here's where it is today. And if it's getting better, then your customers are going to love that. So organic matter, water infiltration, your reduced input costs, your animal health program, even things like your bricks testing. If you're bricks testing your plants, people want to know that stuff because these people are health nuts. Now, I'm saying that in an endearing way. It's a good thing. I'm a health nut, so I can say that without it being condescending, but that's what the customer wants. So that's point number 3. Measure what matters to the customer, not to a government label.
Or even to yourself, right? You might think, well, I think I know what they want, but you've got to ask.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
wrote that down. Ask what they want. Get
Yeah.
feedback. Assume you're wrong. Be humble enough to not say, well, by golly, ours is the best beef. Well, what makes them think that it's the best, not what makes you think that it's the best.
Yeah.
That's what's going to sell.
Right.
Awesome.
And by asking the question, it builds the relationship. So it's a win-win all the way
Absolutely.
around.
Yeah. Okay, point number 4.
Point 4, stop waiting for the government money. We've already talked about that today, but that is point 4. But we don't need welfare to make this happen. What you need are customers. So don't spend time trying to get the money from the government. Just spend time building the relationship. And the reason I bring this up is because most family farmers in the country are taking government money, and it's not going to help you. It just makes it worse every year. Okay. It feels like it helps, but it doesn't in the long run. So I think that's it on number 4. So the last one, number 5, is the farmers who are friends with their communities are going to win in this game. Okay. You're already a member of a community. Just let people know that your beef is available, and then teach people what you're doing, why you're doing it. And then they're going to like it. People are going to say, oh, wow, this is really neat. I didn't know this rancher was so involved in the community, because most of us aren't. Oh,
Yeah, by choice. We're recluses and
yeah,
like to hang out on the ranch and minimize our time in town. And
right.
yeah, so what does that actually look like? I'm integrating into the community, becoming friends with the community so that we can ultimately, in your words, win.
Yeah, you just, when you say being friends, let people know, like I don't want to say this in a way that turns people off, but become an educator. That's kind of what it means.
Mhm.
Start teaching, and it doesn't mean you have to set up a class, but talk to people about what you're doing and why you're doing it. People care about the why. If you have a reason for being a rancher, people want to know it. And, a few minutes ago, I said people don't care. The thing they don't care about is you trying to save something that's been there for 200 years. What they do care about is that you care about them. And so,
Yeah, agreed.
I'm raising beef because I feel like my beef is raised in such a way that it's the healthiest meat possible. And we know it's the healthiest because we're raising it the way that Utah State has been testing the grass-fed beef, and they have the evidence-based peer-reviewed papers to show. And I'm doing it exactly the way that they've said to do it. And if you don't know what that means, then go do a little reading and figure it out. In 5 hours of reading, you can figure that out. It's not rocket science. So people see that, oh, this rancher is actually helping the community. So it's the why you're doing it, to produce really good food, health food. But there could be 20 whys. Here's another why. The other why is, remember 2020? There was not as much food in the grocery store. Some grocery store shelves were bare in certain grocery stores. There was a milk shortage. There was an egg shortage. There were probably beef shortages in a lot of places. I don't know. I don't buy meat at the store, so I don't even know because we got meat from other sources. But I've heard that there's a lot of people who were hungry from time to time during COVID. And so your why could be the world is more unstable now than it was in 2020 during COVID. And I want to make sure that our community has food. So it doesn't even have to be a health food thing of grass fed. It could be a food security thing for your community. So both of those are really good reasons. And, you don't need more than one reason. And so there's two reasons. But the real question is, what is your legitimate reason in your heart? And every rancher, every producer, every apple orchard person needs to figure out, why am I doing this? And if you really don't like it, maybe you should get into a different industry. I don't know. I believe that people should be in an industry that they absolutely love.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Well, these 5 points are excellent. They're on target. William, what is your definition of regenerative?
My definition of regenerative, it's where, I hate to say all the dumb things that everybody else is saying, but it's where you're actually building something so next year you have more than you have this year. So if your bank account isn't growing, you're probably not regenerative.
Yeah.
If your family isn't happier, you're probably not regenerative. If you can't give your kids a little bit more in 2 years than you did a year ago, then you're probably not regenerative. There needs to be some legitimate, measurable growth. Of course, the soil people say we're building topsoil, which is true. There's all the different things that people say, but really your happiness level. If your marriage is getting better every year, and your relationship is growing, then you're probably doing good at your regeneration. But if your ranch or farm is splitting your family up and there's more tension in your marriage or other relationships in your family than there was 3 years ago, then you're not regenerative. So when I look at it, it's the entire package. We're not talking about soil. We're not talking about crops. We're not talking about livestock. We're talking about your entire life. That is my definition. And
I
good
like that a lot.
stewards can do that.
Yep, that is perfect. I wholeheartedly agree with that definition, and that's largely what we do within Ag Steward is help people increase their capacity, their carrying capacity, their personal resilience, their relationships, their own health, their connection with God, their higher power, their ability to increase their cognitive abilities to be able to recognize the opportunities that are out there and speaking of that, recognizing those opportunities, that's one of the reasons that I felt this podcast was important. And likely we'll do these strategically throughout the year, thinking about when people go through a crisis, they tend to shut down, their cortisol rises, and they are no longer thinking clearly. And so they tend to be reactive instead of proactive. And hopefully, if you are listening to this and we are so aware that there are challenges in any market. Right now, there are challenges in the livestock market. Livestock prices are really high. I think this is a wonderful time to be able to get your house in order and prepare because it's law. Nothing can rise so high that it will not fall. The farmers, on the other hand, they're not doing so great. Things are tough, and very few of them are profitable right now as a whole. There certainly are those exceptions, those who are selling direct to consumer and to niche markets or specialty markets where they're doing okay. But the farmers as a whole, yeah, they're not making a lot of money right now and haven't for a couple years. So that emotional resilience becomes even as important as anything else we do. William, how do you increase your emotional capacity? How do you increase your emotional resilience to be able to handle the crises when they come, not if they come?
I'm glad you asked, and this is something we talk about to our students all the time. Being aware of what's happening in your own mind is probably the number one thing. So there are the external things that happen to me, and I can't really control those. But my internal world, the way I'm thinking about stuff, I can control all of that. So the main thing that I want to do is when something external happens, let's say a price drops. We're ready to sell our calves, and all of a sudden the price drops out. If I would have sold them yesterday, I would have had a good profit. And we all know somebody who's had this experience, right?
Oh,
And so the question is that you ask yourself when a bad thing happens is this happening to me or is this happening for me? So every time something negative happens, obviously it's negative, and I'm not saying it's not, because that's just nuts to try to pretend that something bad didn't happen. That's not what I'm saying. Bad things do happen, but think about it. When a bad thing happens, if it happened for me, now I have control to do something in my life, okay? But if it happened to me, now I'm very reactionary and I have no control to make a good decision or to learn from it or to move forward. I'm paralyzed, I'm frustrated. And when we have high cortisol, which means you have high stress, you have very little creativity. And so being creative is how we solve problems. So always just remember that everything that happens, good and bad, it happens for us. And just try to get rid of that. Don't have that stress response. And you will have the stress response. Everybody has it at first, but you don't want to have it after tomorrow. If it happens today, fine. But tomorrow, tell yourself a different story. I mean, there's people who are bitter for generations. The Hatfields and McCoys are still fighting and they don't even know why anymore. And so we've got to get over the, the story that we told ourselves about what happened last year.
yeah, really good. Well, thank you for bringing that in. I know you have a story about your ancestors, and I'll share a quick one about my grandfather, who was a sheep man. He worked in southern Utah. He was born in 1900, so he saw this complete cycle. Each one of these cycles of history he lived through, and he died in 96. So started out in southern Utah, went to work for a family member, and he took sheep for pay. And during that time was the time of the Great Depression, when a lot of people went out of business. Some businessmen committed suicide. I'm sure there were some really stressful experiences that happened then. My grandfather, on the other hand, came out of the Depression relatively wealthy, a decent band of sheep, one big enough to support his family. And from that, he ended up here in Nevada and grew and grew and grew into the ranch that now multiple family members are blessed to steward now. So that's an example of a crisis happening, different mindsets. Some mindsets shut down and they said, hey, this is the end and there's no options. Others said, hey, there's an opportunity here. How can we utilize our creative powers that God's endowed us with to be able to create opportunities not only for ourselves, but also for many other people? I think last time you shared a story about when was it your father or grandfather that sold when the market was down?
Yeah, yeah. So I was a kid in the 1980s, and I was my dad's right-hand man all the time. We did everything together. He was a school teacher, but he was really a full-time farmer first, and we had 100 sheep, which was a big herd of sheep for Hurricane, Utah at that point,
Yeah.
because all the big herds had gone away a generation before. But we had just a pickup truckload of sheep, and we took them up to Cedar City to the livestock market, and we sold them. And my dad could never understand the auctioneer, so he didn't know how much they went for. He went and got his check, and I think it was like $36 or something like that for like 8 or 10 sheep that were in that truck. And he's like, "What in the world?" He was expecting about $50 a head. He was talking to the lady who handed him the check, and he's like, "What is this?" And she goes, "Well, that's your check." He said, "Well, I sold 10 sheep. This is $38." She was really embarrassed and sad, and she didn't want him to come over the desk and strangle her. And he was respectful, but he didn't know what to do. But we went and got in the truck, and we're sitting there in the truck in the parking lot. And he said, "Well, should I go back in?" And he's just holding the check, looking at it. And he said, "Well, should we go back in and try to find the person who bought them and hand them the check and say, 'I want my sheep back'?" And he said, "Or should we just go home and never come back again?" And we didn't know what to do. And of course, I'm just a kid. I was probably 10, 12 years old. I don't remember. But we ended up just going home. And he was pretty upset. And he said, "Well, I'm never taking sheep to the auction again. We're going to do something else." I remember him and my mom, they were talking for hours that evening. And she was a go-getter. She was a fighter. She said, "Well, I'll sell all your sheep for you. That's what I'm gonna do." And so she got on the phone that night and she called a bunch of people. And in a week, she had sold like a bunch of sheep, maybe 20 lambs that were fat and ready to butcher. And he said, "Well, I want $50 a sheep. That's what I want." And so she did. She sold all these sheep for $50. So the people would come and they'd get the sheep and then they'd just take it themselves to a local butcher and have it butchered. A few years ago, when I got a little bit older, I had learned to butcher from my grandma. She taught me how to butcher. And my dad said, "You're actually really good at this, and those carcasses look really good. They look as good as when the butcher does it. Why don't you just butcher them and then we'll charge them?" Because the butcher was charging, like, I don't know, $20, $30 or whatever to butcher it, not to cut it up, but just to butcher it. And then you have a whole lamb hanging there. And so he raised the price. So the customer didn't pay any more, but we were getting the money because I was butchering them. And then the people would take it home and cut it up themselves or whatever. I don't know what. Some of them may have taken it to somebody to saw it up at a local butcher. But so this went on for quite a few years until I left home, till I was 18. So a lot of my teenage years, I was butchering, 20 to probably 30 sheep a year
Mhm.
for just local people. No, that's a very small operation, but it just goes to show you that people want to participate in a relationship. And my mom was
Yeah.
able to sell those sheep because she said she would just call them and say, "We just took sheep to the auction and they didn't give us anything. It didn't even cover the feed cost." Sometimes women really talk a lot. If you want to, I worked for a veterinarian in Missouri for 5 years, and if you want to get something done, you go get your hair done. So anyway, women have a great talent of being able to do some things, right? So let the women, let the daughters and the wives in our lives get things done. Stay out of their way. But it worked for us. It was
Yeah.
good and it was fun. And I earned money. And it was, we used our gifts and our talents to be able to do this. So these are the kind of ideas that we just need to get creative. We're all members of community. Get to know a few more people. Figure out where people are looking and those kinds of things. But
Yeah.
I
Really good.
I see so much opportunity in today's climate, in the world we live in. Like if you turn on the news, there is nothing positive. There's just not. But because of all of the upheaval in the world, there is big opportunity to solve people's problems. And one of the big problems is people are looking for food straight directly from farms, and they're struggling to get it. There is a bigger demand than there is supply. So, raise your hand and say, "I have beef, I have lamb, I have pork, I have apples, I have lettuce, I have carrots," whatever it is you have. And, people want that stuff.
Excellent. Really good. Really good. Well, thank you, William. We appreciate that. Appreciate you sharing, giving us some hope and some insights. Any other thoughts or comments you have?
No, that's it. I'm
That
excited for the future. I'm excited for to be able to be on this podcast today with you. Thank you. If
you,
you know anybody, any adults 18 and up who wants to come to the Georgic Schoolroom this summer, check out my website,
yeah.
georgicrevolution.com.
Yeah, we'll put the link to that in the notes so people can go and check that out. And that's a great opportunity for these, especially young people when they're in that transition phase between teenage to adulthood. It's just a great way to be able to get their feet underneath them and really teach them not only some great skills to be able to grow food, but how to think for themselves, how to articulate themselves, get to know themselves, who they really are. That is so valuable. So thanks everybody for listening. We want to again thank our sponsor, Amy Hay and Sell Beef Direct. Go check out the work that she's doing. Highly endorse the program that she's put together to do exactly what we've talked about here. Not all of us are marketers, and we probably didn't get into ranching because we love marketing and we want to put our face on Facebook every day. So she's done the hard work for us. It's just literally a plug and play system. Encourage you to check that out and come back. We'll be posting more of these. These will be randomly interspersed with the other things that we regularly do, our regular webinars that are recorded. And so thanks everybody for listening. 2 asks. 1, if you've enjoyed this, share it with somebody else. Could be sharing it on social media, help get the word out. And then number 2, like and subscribe to our channels, whether that's on YouTube or the podcast channels. That helps this message to get out to more people. Thank you and God bless.